Challenger Owen Smith joins me now, and a very good morning to you, Mr.
Good morning.
Smith. Well, let's talk about the polling. I mean, it's looking pretty grim for you, it must be said.
Well, there's only been one poll so far, David. People keep talking about the polls. There was one poll done by Populous and YouGov, rather, and the only vote there's been so far was in the GMB's membership, and there I won 26,000 to 17,000. So I don't know what the result's going to be. I'm just going to keep on going, talking about the issues to the end.
And I've heard some of your supporters talking about, you know, the unexpected Brexit result after the polls, the general election before that. But those polls, as it turns out, were only 2 or 3 percentage points out. That poll you're talking about has Jeremy Corbyn on 62%. It'd have to be 13, 14 points out. It's pretty unlikely, isn't it?
Yeah, look, and Jeremy has always been the favourite in this term. We know that. He won with 60% last time. I was obviously always the underdog in this fight, but I hope I've spoken with passion about what I believe. I've said very clearly that I think the party isn't going to win an election with Jeremy as leader. I've said very clearly that I don't think we've been a very strong opposition with him. I don't think we've been united, and I do think we need to change the leader of the Labour Party in order to get back to being something the country can look at and see as a credible alternative to the Tories.
But is there part of you now, do you wake up in the middle of the night and think, this could really have backfired? He was, of course, destabilised by all those resignations, by the lack of a vote of confidence in him by the Parliamentary Labour Party, and you've given him a chance here, haven't you? If he wins this with an even bigger majority, you've given Mr Corbyn a chance, those of you that want to see him out, of strengthening his grip on Labour.
Potentially, yes. I mean, I didn't start this fight, as it were. I was somebody who came to challenge once a challenge had already been levelled at Jeremy. But I still think that we've had a really important debate in Labour. Whatever the outcome of this, we've been forced, if you like, to look at ourselves and think much harder than we were doing about whether we've been effective in fighting the Tories, whether we've looked like an alternative to them, whether we're winning back some of the trust and respect that we lost over a long period in the public in this country. And I think the truth is that we have lost a lot of that respect and we're not looking credible, and we needed to have this debate, and we will need to continue to have this debate, whoever wins on Saturday.
But you say potentially Mr Corbyn could strengthen his grip and his supporters on the party. Well, let's examine some of those processes that we hear that, well, particularly giving the membership control of electing the shadow cabinet. That used to be the prerogative of MPs. Well, who are they going to pick? And also this idea of selecting and vetoing party policy.
Yeah, I mean, I've read the report in the Observer. Yeah, it does rather. I've read the report in the Observer this morning, and it's presented as apparently being a sort of conciliatory gesture by Jeremy. It isn't a conciliatory gesture. You know, it's not simply an attempt to extend democracy in the Labour Party. It's an attempt to deepen divisions between new members and MPs. It's an attempt to, you know, further cement his position and to use the membership as a means of driving a wedge between the MPs and his leadership. If he was serious about trying to unify the party, then he would be taking serious the notion of going back to the traditional method we've had of guaranteeing that there was some balance in the shadow cabinet and that everybody felt in the party that they had some representation, which was election through the PLP. You know, I'm in favour of us having more democracy in the Labour Party, but I don't think Jeremy and his team can get away with saying that this is all about an olive branch, when really and truly it's about deepening the divisions that he's created in the party.
Well, you've talked a lot. You've talked just now about making the party electable. There's no point having the best policies in the world if you don't get a chance to implement them.
Precisely.
Do you not think, though, back to what we were discussing earlier, you've given Jeremy Corbyn and his supporters, in your analysis, a chance to take the party even further away from being electable?
Well, I gave a big speech at the beginning of this week, Germany, which I talked about my concerns that there were people within the Labour Party who are seeking to take it over and to take it away from the voters.
Coalesce around momentum.
Yeah, and we've seen, I think there's a big dispatches programme on television on Channel 4 tomorrow that simply reiterates the point I was making, that in parts of the country, in most parts of the country, Momentum are seeking, in their words, to take over the party and to deselect people, talking about handing out redundancy notices to party staff members. You know, the contrast is they're talking about spending members' money on redundancy payments to staff members. I'm talking about hiring new staff members, using that money in order to put organise into the key seats we need to win the next general election. As I pointed out in the last hustings, Jeremy doesn't even know how many seats we need to win to form a government. Now, I think that's an illustration of the fact that he's not terribly serious about doing that, and that he is much more happy winning arguments within the Labour Party than he is about winning the country.
Well, there are those within your party, before Mr Corbyn gets re-elected, already talking about a split or some kind of de facto split with the parliamentary party elements of that running itself in the House of Commons. If you lose, will you be joining those voices, or would you be considering joining Mr Corbyn's front bench?
No, I've said clearly already that I don't think I could serve on the front bench under Jeremy's leadership, because I don't think I could do that with integrity, having spent the summer saying that I don't think Jeremy is up to the job and that I don't think Jeremy is going to lead us to victory. I think it would be wrong for me then to serve alongside Jeremy. But I won't do what Jeremy did. Jeremy voted against the Labour government and the Labour Party 450-odd times, 500 times, I think. You know, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to carry on voting.
But what about
Labour.
this plan? I mean, as I say, these people talking about a de facto split, some even talking about a formal split.
I think any talk of splits is disaster for Labour. I think we've got to fight to win the party respect back in the country. I think that means fighting within the Labour Party, making our arguments in a comradely fashion, not trying to deepen these divisions, but being honest about where we sit right now. Jeremy used to talk about wanting a bit more honest, straight-talking politics, and I agree with him about that, but he's not honest to say we're flying high.
Yeah, but
we're at our lowest ebb.
You're talking about honesty, given the conversations that we've had over the last few weeks and months. If Mr Corbyn wins and you're sitting there on the back benches loyally supporting him, we'll know you're living a lie. You don't believe it.
Well, I'll be supporting Labour because I fundamentally believe that I fundamentally believe in loyalty in Labour. And whilst I've challenged Jeremy, it's not been because I don't want to take over the Labour Party. It's because I want to make sure that the Labour Party, the party I love and have been in for a long, long time, is electable and is speaking to the concerns of the country. That's what I've tried to do during this contest. I've spoken about, the need for big investment, but I've said how we pay for it. I've said that we need to be challenging the Tories on what they're doing to the NHS. I mean, I'm worried to read in the newspapers this morning that John McDonnell hasn't asked a single question in his brief, a written question, since he took over the job. That's not proper opposition. We're meant to be Her Majesty's loyal opposition. That means you've got to oppose and expose the government when they're getting things wrong. And we've not been good at even that fundamental task, let alone the bigger task of looking like a credible alternative.
But just lastly, on the policy similarities, it said, between you and Mr Corbyn, I saw someone commenting then effectively what Mr Smith is saying is that I've got more charisma and are better looking than Jeremy Corbyn, because that's the way you think you get elected. Same policy portfolio, so what's the difference?
Well, I've never said I was better looking than Jeremy. He's a very good looking man. But what I have done is spelled out how I pay for these things. So yes, I'm saying we should invest, but I'm not doing what John McDonnell says and says I'm going to invest 500 billion without saying who it's going to pay for. I say let's invest 200 billion, but let's show the country how we do it through issuing long-dated government debt. I've said clearly, let's make sure we can spend 60 billion over a parliament on the NHS. That's deemed to be left-wing, to want to invest in our public services. But the difference between me and John is I've said precisely which taxes on the very wealthiest in this country, on the 1%, I'd raise, and on corporations, in order to pay for that. I've said we should retain our Trident nuclear missile system. I've said we should spend 2% on defence. Big differences between me and them, Dermot, and I think I've spelled those out during this contest.
If you win, we'll be having those precise discussions.
Look forward
again.
to it. Can't wait.
Mr Smith, good to see you.
Thanks a lot.
Smith, Labour leadership contender.